Have you ever looked at your life and thought, I have everything I should need, yet I feel completely lost? It's a haunting kind of confusion, one that logic can't untangle and success can't silence. In the stillness of night, when distractions fall away, you're left with a quiet dread, a feeling that something essential is missing, something you can't name. This is not failure. This is not depression. This is a calling, a sacred disruption. And unless you understand why this disorientation has arrived, you will keep circling the same emotional labyrinth. Today, you'll discover that this confusion is not the end, but the invitation into the beginning, into the hidden map your soul has been drawing since the moment you were born. Stay with this message, because in its unfolding lies the first real clarity you may have ever touched. There is a strange kind of suffering that no external circumstance can fully explain. You can have a stable job, supportive family, and even moments of laughter, yet still feel as though something essential is missing. It's not depression in the clinical sense, and it's not simply dissatisfaction. It's a hollowness that wraps around your inner world like a fog. It dulls your joy, blurs your vision, and leaves you wandering through life with a sense of detachment, as though you were a stranger to your own existence. This is the crisis of inner disorientation, and for many, it begins without warning. It creeps in slowly, until one day you wake up and realize that the life you've built no longer feels like it belongs to you. But what if this lostness is not a defect? What if it is the soul's first signal that the outer form of your life has outgrown its meaning? This kind of disorientation is not a problem to be solved with quick answers or forced positivity. It is a calling, a sacred threshold. It marks the beginning of a psychological death, the death of illusions, of unconscious roles, of identities you adopted to survive, but not to thrive. You were not being punished. You were being summoned into deeper awareness, into an initiation that strips away falsehoods so the truth can begin to emerge. But this process is terrifying because it dismantles everything you thought you were. And yet, this dismantling is necessary. Without it, you remain trapped in the surface layers of existence, unable to access the richness and depth of your true nature. What drives this sudden sense of inner collapse is often invisible to the conscious mind. It begins in the unconscious, in the depths of the psyche. Long before you consciously realize it, your soul begins to pull away from inauthentic pursuits. It no longer wants to participate in the games of status, performance, and conformity. It no longer finds satisfaction in the roles you've perfected. Slowly, the things that used to motivate you begin to lose their pull. Achievements feel empty. Social gatherings feel draining. Even rest doesn't feel restful. You may try to push through, distract yourself, set new goals, or force gratitude, but none of it quite works. That's because the deeper you sink its roots into truth, the more shallow the surface feels. And so begins the dark night of the soul, not as a punishment, but as a divine rebellion against a life that no longer reflects your inner reality. In this dark night, there are no instructions, no map, only a growing sense that the compass of your soul is spinning, trying to point towards something beyond the visible horizon. The modern world, in its obsession with efficiency and external success, offers no language for this inner unraveling. You are expected to be okay, to move forward, to perform. But the soul does not respond to performance. It responds to honesty. And if you're honest, you know something inside you is breaking. But maybe that's exactly what's needed. Maybe what's breaking is the shell you mistook for the self. This is where the journey inward truly begins. But the descent into the unconscious is not a casual stroll. It is a descent into forgotten corridors of your own psyche, to the abandoned rooms where your true feelings were buried, where your unlived desires still wait, where your wounds speak in symbols and dreams. This descent is initiated by the soul itself. It is a movement away from the known, away from the comfortable, and into the mystery. You are not losing your way. You are being led deeper into it. But in order to understand the messages of the soul, you must learn to listen in a new way, not with logic, but with presence, not with judgment, but with curiosity. The soul communicates not through linear thought, but through archetype and image. You may find yourself haunted by certain dreams, symbols, or inner impulses that seem irrational. These are not random. They are signals. They are attempts by your deeper self to break through the rigid constructs of your ego and initiate a more authentic way of being. But to receive these messages, you must surrender your need for control. You must allow the unknown to speak, and in doing so, you allow yourself to be transformed. One of the greatest obstacles on this journey is the persona, the mask you've constructed to gain approval, success, and belonging in society. This persona is not inherently evil. It serves a purpose. It helps you navigate the external world, perform social roles, and meet expectations. But the danger lies in identification. When you forget that the persona is only a role, you begin to believe it is your true self. And over time, you become trapped in the image you've created. You start to measure your worth by how well the persona performs. Are you liked? Are you productive? Are you impressive? But beneath all of that is the quiet question your soul keeps asking. Are you real? The persona is seductive because it offers protection. It allows you to avoid rejection, failure, and vulnerability. But it also separates you from your essence. The more you invest in being who you think you should be, the more you abandon who you actually are. This creates a split in the psyche fragmentation between your outer life and your inner truth. And eventually, the pressure of this split becomes unbearable. That's when the dark night intensifies. That's when the soul intervenes, not to destroy you, but to restore you. It wants to reclaim what the persona has buried. But shedding the persona is not easy. It feels like death because in a way, it is. It is the death of false certainty, the death of societal expectations, the death of being liked at the expense of being whole. You must confront the terrifying possibility that who you truly are may not fit into the world you've built around the mask. But this confrontation is necessary. Without it, you will continue to perform your way through life, never truly living, never truly being seen. The unraveling of the persona is the gateway to clarity, but it requires immense courage. You must be willing to be misunderstood, to be vulnerable, to face parts of yourself that you've spent years avoiding. This is not a gentle process. It is a psychological crucifixion, a stripping away of all that is false, so that the truth may rise. But in that rising, there is liberation. There is the return of your voice, your instincts, your creativity. You begin to feel again not just pleasure, but pain, grief, or wonder. And through that feeling, you begin to heal. The persona may have helped you survive, but it cannot help you become. Becoming requires authenticity. It requires presence. It requires a radical commitment to living from the inside out, rather than the outside in. When you begin to live this way, clarity doesn't come as a single revelation. It comes in layers, in moments, in quiet certainties that rise from within. You stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, what feels true to me now? And that question becomes your compass. You may not have all the answers. The path ahead may still be unclear. But the difference is that you are no longer looking for clarity outside of yourself. You are beginning to trust the clarity that emerges from within. The more you shed the persona, the more aligned you become with your essence. And in that alignment, even the chaos begins to make sense. It becomes part of your myth, part of your unfolding story. You realize that the lostness was never a detour, it was the path itself, leading you back to yourself. This is the beginning of true psychological rebirth, not a return to who you were, but a becoming of who you are. The fragments of your life start to speak to each other again. The unconscious and conscious begin to integrate. And slowly, a new kind of clarity emerges. Not the clarity of external control, but the clarity of inner congruence. You are no longer living from reaction, but from alignment. No longer chasing meaning, but embodying it. The moment you begin to confront the parts of yourself that you've spent years denying is the moment the true journey inward begins. Until this confrontation takes place, life will feel like a performance under the weight of unseen tension. What you suppress does not disappear, it grows roots in the unconscious. There, it waits, not to punish you, but to be reintegrated. The darkness you fear is not outside of you, it is within. It is the forgotten parts of your being that have been labeled unworthy, irrational, shameful. These elements form what we call the shadow, and until the shadow is made conscious, it will shape your life in ways you do not understand. Most people try to bypass the shadow. They seek light, clarity, and transcendence without ever touching the mud in which their soul is planted. But transformation is never clean or orderly. It is messy. It requires excavation. The things you hate in others, their arrogance, their selfishness, their anger are often mirrors of what you refuse to see in yourself. That is why shadow work is not merely a therapeutic tool, it is a sacred act, a return to wholeness. It is not about becoming good, but about becoming real. To meet the shadow, you must move beyond moral categories. You must stop asking, is this good or bad? And start asking, is this part of me? It is not evil to feel rage, grief, envy, or lust. These emotions, when integrated, are not destructive. They are powerful sources of energy and truth. They become dangerous only when exiled. When left unconscious, the shadow does not disappear. It acts out through sabotage, projection, and inner conflict. But when welcomed, it becomes a bridge, a portal into deeper authenticity. This process demands humility. You must be willing to see the truth of your complexity without turning away. You must be able to say, yes, that lives in me too, without collapsing into shame. This is the crucible of maturity. And in that crucible, alchemy takes place. What was once fragmented becomes unified. What was once feared becomes understood. You do not conquer the shadow. You embrace it. You offer it a seat at the table. And, in doing so, you become more human, not less. There is no fixed timeline for this work. It moves in cycles. One day, you might feel free. The next, you are gripped by an old wound. But each cycle deepens your awareness. Each encounter with the shadow refines your consciousness. You begin to see life not as something to be controlled, but as something to be lived with courage and presence. The chaos within you becomes less threatening. You realize it is the soil in which new life is growing. And this is where something remarkable begins to happen. The very chaos that once disoriented, he begins to reveal patterns, coincidences, symbols, dreams, encounters. These are not meaningless accidents. They are synchronicities, meaningful patterns that reflect the dialogue between your inner world and outer experience. Synchronicity is not superstition. It is the language of the soul, breaking through the veil of ordinary perception. When you are attuned to your unconscious, the world begins to reflect your inner journey. A phrase in a book, a random stranger's comment, a sudden dream, they strike you with eerie relevance, as if the universe is responding to your inner state. These moments are not to be dismissed. They are invitations, openings, clues. The ego seeks control, but the soul seeks meaning. And meaning does not arise through force, it arises through connection. When you experience synchronicity, you are glimpsing a deeper order that transcends linear cause and effect. You are touching the archetypal realm, where events carry symbolic resonance. This is where healing accelerates, not because you find certainty, but because you find alignment. You realize you are not alone in your chaos. Something greater is moving through it, guiding you, shaping you, speaking to you in the language of pattern. To engage with synchronicity is to live poetically. It means you approach life not as a machine to be mastered, but as a myth to be lived. You begin to pay attention to your dreams, not as random images, but as messages. You observe recurring numbers, animal symbols, and emotional patterns, with superstition, but with reverence. You begin to see that life itself is communicating with you, shaping your transformation from within and without. This awareness softens the fear. You no longer ask, why is this happening to me? But rather, what is this asking of me? That shift from victimhood to participation is a turning point in any dark night. It transforms suffering into initiation. And in the midst of this unfolding, something begins to emerge, not a new role or identity, but a presence, a stillness, a clarity that does not come from external validation, but from internal coherence. You begin to recognize the authentic self not as a static personality, but as a dynamic unfolding of your being. The authentic self is not constructed, it is revealed. It is not perfect, it is whole. It carries your contradictions, your wounds, your shadow, and your light in a single container. It does not strive to be someone. It rests in being. This self is not loud. It does not shout for attention. It does not cling to status or image. It is quiet, rooted, and unshakable. It speaks through intuition, not impulse. Through clarity, not certainty. Through presence, not performance. And once you taste this self, even briefly, you cannot return to your old way of living. The chase for approval, the obsession with outcomes, the addiction to control, they begin to dissolve. You are no longer trying to become someone. You are returning to the one you already are beneath the noise. But this return does not happen all at once. It unfolds in layers. Each insight peels away a distortion. Each act of courage realigns you. Each encounter with the unknown deepens your trust. You stop searching for the path because you realize you are the path. The authentic self is not a destination. It is a relationship. A relationship with your truth, your values, your soul. And that relationship requires constant renewal. This is not the kind of clarity that promises you ease. It does not remove all obstacles or prevent future suffering. But it gives you something more powerful, a foundation, a rootedness in your own being that cannot be shaken by external chaos. You begin to live from the inside out. You begin to trust your process, even when you don't understand it. You begin to see your life not as a problem to solve, but as a mystery to live. And as you live this way, others begin to feel it. Your presence shifts. You no longer seek to impress. You seek to connect. You no longer try to rescue others from their darkness, because you trust that their darkness has meaning. 2. You no longer need to prove your worth, because you have already reclaimed it from within. This is the power of wholeness, not the absence of pain, but the ability to hold it with grace. In this state, you do not reject your past. You integrate it. You see how every failure shaped you, how every breakdown prepared you, how every shadow held a secret gift. You become grateful not for the suffering itself, but for what it revealed. You carry your scars not as shame, but as symbols of transformation. You no longer fear the dark night, because you have walked through it and emerged more whole. And the journey does not end here. It continues. The psyche is vast, the soul is infinite, and the unfolding never ceases. There are deeper layers to meet, new shadows to face, higher truths to embody. But now, you no longer fear the unknown. You recognize it as the very source of your becoming. You are not here to arrive. You are here to evolve. And the more you surrender to that evolution, the more your life becomes a living expression of your soul's deepest truth.